100 years ago, Germany and Russia declared war on each other. Tisha B'Av, it's the beginning of World War I. The numbers of Jews that fought on both sides led to situations where Jews were fighting Jews. And along the way, incidentally, both sides and their allies used the opportunity to institute pogroms, ravage Jewish communities. Sometimes some of the Jewish soldiers succeeded in saving individuals and remnants. 522 years ago, the decree of the expulsion from Spain was to have them leave on Tisha B'Av. It had actually been earlier. Got delayed, and it fell on Tisha B'Av. The Abarbanel writes that had Ferdinand and Isabel appreciated the chizuk, the encouragement that they had given to the Yedei Dava, those who were knowledgeable in appreciating the divine providence in having it fall on Tisha B'Av, that's again an indication that the Rebbeinu Shalom hasn't left us. Retribution, expiation, but not abandonment. That would be the utmost tragedy. Abarbanel, Bezdin, takes a decision, a psak, that they go out with music, Tuprim and Mecheles. Tisha B'Av, an enormous tragedy, the expulsion from Spain, 500 years of a golden era. But they need to have their spirits buoyed up, to be reinforced. And there's a hero sure that that's what's needed. Going out into uncharted roads, unpoliced, and where they were policed, the police were worse than the marauders. So they needed a certain strength to be reinforced. Koach of Klal Yisrael, that koach of Torah, that Talmud that was burnt, as we heard so eloquently by how Rabbi Breidowitz described, that the Python bemoans, that's what keeps us alive in Golus and allows us to deal with the flow and the flux of every new exigency and challenge that Klal Yisrael meets. I heard from Rav Yaakov Weinberg, of Shmuel Yaakov Weinberg, Zecher Lebracha, Zecher Tzadik Lebracha, that said that, as it were, Kavayochel, the Rebbeinu Shem had to make a decision by Sinai. Freeze all of the options and permutations of what could happen. Nothing new will be introduced. So in a document which is submitted to a specific people at a particular place, at a certain juncture in history, will always be applicable because nothing new will ever happen. Alternatively, the Rebbeinu Shem creates a world where there is the flow and the flux of change. And he equips us with a Torah Shebal Peh that we can be mechadish. We can make the takonis and exeris that are necessary. But as we've elaborated in the past, now's not the time to go into it, there's a crucial difference between shinui and change. And the art, the challenge of being a Torah Jew is to be mechadish, that we can initiate whatever innovations are necessary so that no matter how much on the surface it appears we've changed, the essence remains the same. And it's all the difference in the world when you work from within the grid of the halacha. And the Abarbanel's takona to go out but Tupma Mechelis was taken with clarity, criteria, using the norms that anchor us in history. We're different enough so that we remain the same throughout history. In time and in space, if you go back or you go forward, or if you spread out, every kehila with its minhagim, different. But that's what's protected us, so we can, the differences are on the periphery, so that the core of the Dalet Amos of Halacha has remained steadfast. We read the Novi, Mi'itein Roishi Mayim, the Python echoes it in those piyutim that talk about the tragedies that subsequently came about in Jewish history. And Bali Musa have quoted Koptran, tears of the head, tears of the mind. And I thought, what is meant by tears of the mind? Here's not the place, but there are those that differentiate between pathos and tragedy. Pathos is something pathetic, sad. You walk out of the house and you see a cat get hit by a car. It's sad, it's pathetic. But tragedy is reserved for a case where there was extraordinary potential that went awry, that didn't come to fruition, that wasn't actualized. Once saw in a sefer, it's talking about Avelis, Galiciana Godel, Mishmer Sholem, I think was the name of the sefer, brings the Gemara that says, Kol ha-meirid dmos, anybody who sheds tears, alodem kosher, for a person who was, let's say, righteous at the moment. The Rebbeinu Shalom counts them, seifam, umachnisam bebeis gnozav, and he puts them in a special warehouse, a special storage place of his treasures. This Godel said, what's being told to us? Counting those tears, putting them in his treasure chest. What does that mean? Perhaps, he said, during the course of a person's lifetime, a human being sheds so many meaningless tears, even less than pathos, totally meaningless. So you might think that serious tears become bottled, they're canceled out, they're nullified within the overwhelming number of meaningless and foolish tears that we shed during the course of a lifetime. Kamash Malon, the Gemara is teaching us that it's a dovish of a minion. It's something that gets counted, which halachically doesn't get bottled. The Rebbeinu Shalom Sefer, he counts them. But there's a Tanai, there's a prerequisite for a dovish of a minion. It has to be something of value. The Rebbeinu Shalom puts it in his treasure chest. There are tears and there are tears. Perhaps Miyitein Roishi Mayim what's being alluded to is it should be those kind of tears that are rooted in Havana and understanding, in the omek, in the depths of what the tragedy is about. To understand the difference between an emotional, reactive response that's a reflex response or something that comes from an assessment and an evaluation of all of the extensions and ramifications. Mi'iten roishi mayim, koptreon, tears of the mind. Rabbi Yitzchak referred to that Chazal talked about the boys and girls that were abducted to be exploited. Gimon and Izokin, I always can remember where the Chorban is spoken about. Reb Tzadok says that it's in Meseches Gittin, Ki'ilu the Rebbeinu Shalom was Megareshos, and in Izokin, all of the damage and the impact of the retribution that we absorbed. And the Gemara there says that the little girls understood, they finally got why they were being taken, and they come and they ask a shaila to the eldest of the boys. If they jump into the Yam, they commit suicide, will their neshamas yet be retrieved? That's somehow they allowed. The eldest of the boys quotes a posik, and they act upon it. And then the boy says, they were being taken for exploitation, immorality. We're being taken for perversion. Allah has kama v'kama, and they make a kavachema, and they also. That's not from the gut. It's not an emotional response. That's soberly evaluating, weighing, what am I chiyuvim? What am I here for? Who created me? What is my responsibility? That's koptrelen. There the Gemara relates, Isha v'shiva baneha, woman, and 7 sons, and each one is taken out on Kiddush Hashem, and each one quotes his own posuk. The Marshal is medayik already, that it happened over a course of a week, and each posuk is correlated with the Shir Shal Yom of the course of that week. Why was it necessary to make that connection? And I've suggested here in the past that there is a kind of ecstasy for self-immolation. The world bears witness to it. We see it ad hayom hazeh. That's not what confirms the truth of your position, self-immolation. Mechatesa. You're in a state of ecstasy. Who says that means, that confirms that you're right? They're chiyuvim. They're koptreon. Each boy quotes his own pasuk. He's not mushpa, he's not overwhelmed, overtaken by the fact of what his brothers have done. They haven't fixed the parameters of his decision. Is it something to take note of? Yes. But he has to determine, he's coming with his own pasuk. This is my chiyuv. Mother asked to, just before then, the Caesar throws down his ring, the Gemara says, tells the little boy, the youngest, just bend down to pick it up. It'll seem as if you're bowing down. And that's good enough. I just want to save face. And the little boy answers him, if you're so concerned about your kavod, imagine the kavod, the prestige of the Melech Malchei Malochim, the Creator. And he turns him down. A question and an answer. A proposition that's rejected. And the mother says, you're going up to Shemayim. She asks for a moment to kiss him, say goodbye. To the youngest, send a message to Avraham Avinu. He brought one Akedah. I brought 7. And Reb Chaim Shmulevitz, Zecher Tzadik Levrocha, said, obviously she's not playing one-upmanship. She said, Tzedekes. She's saying, I want you to know you succeeded, Avraham Avinu. If a simple Jewess like myself could bring 7 such kabbonos, it's because you imbued this power, this koyach, in Klal Yisrael. We see in the world at large cynicism that's not willing to forfeit any of their indulgences and pleasures for any ideal. And we see the other extreme of self-immolation and ecstasy for nonsense, for deceitful lies. But this extraordinary equilibrium, this balance, this koach of the Jew to quantify the emotions and to apply them according to the objective criteria of the divine ideals. That's our unique province. That Avram, you were meirish, and you gave us that koach. Koptrelen. The word sechvi in Eov is used to mean leiv, heart. I once asked my chabrusa, Rabbi Yossel Zentbert, Zecher Tzadik Levrocha, what's the connection between sechvi as rooster and sechvi as heart? Same word, obviously there's some connection. That's cardinal to our thinking and our principles of how we unravel the different levels and tiers of meaning in Torah. And he said, just like the rooster, the sechvi, make a bracha, the havchin ben yom ve'eleh, he anticipates the dawn before it's visible. That's his mila. Once it's visible, everybody sees it. Similarly, the heart intuits an insight, the truth, before it can be quantified. But it leaves us with a problem, Imkain. I wondered, the pasuk we read this morning, Yodata hayom v'ashevosa elavavecha. Ashevosa, know it and return it to your heart. You don't return something to a place that it never was. It means it was once there. Where is it? The Rebbeinu Shalom implants intuitively a lot of ideas, insights, truths and inclinations in every heart. But then we must filter them through V'yodata, the criteria of halacha. But then it's not enough to know it. It has to be returned to the heart. You have to bring it back to the heart. Gemara and Tainus says, Kishem shemematen, just like we have to be memayit, reduce the simcha mishenichnas of. Similarly, malbin besimcha in order. Fair amount of discussion, the mafalshim. What's the kishem? It's two independent responsibilities. What does the miut, the reduction of the simcha in Ov, have to do with the increase of simcha in order? There's a message here. I saw those, the Shevet Musa, that say that just like it goes incrementally, there's an increase in the amount of Avelus from Rosh Chodesh Av till you climax with Tisha B'Av. Similarly, in order, there's going to be an incremental increase as you reach the climax, till you reach the climax of Purim. Perhaps there's another approach. Brought in Shulchan Aruch that the Morgan Avram says memaiten besimcha means no simcha at all. Brings a Tosfos. Tosfos talks about Tainus Tzibur, that no simcha at all. The Shai Tzion brings Tosfos in Acholet. Tosfos there says, no. Memaitin means memaitin. Reducing. But etvas, some semblance of simcha remains. Minimally. Hidden. In a certain sense. That's Koralai Moyed. We didn't say Tachnun today. We didn't say yesterday by Mincha. Moyed. It's going to be a Moyed. But there's something, what does that have to do with now? Reb Chaim Volozhiner, Medayik in the Gemara. So the Sasema says something similar, that Kol ha-misabel al Yerushalayim zeicha v'roya b'simchosa. Anybody who's misabel, mourns for Yerushalayim, is privileged, merits partaking in her simcha. But it's in the present tense. It doesn't say yizke v'yireh, he will eventually see. Why present tense? The point is made, Reb Chaim, just like Yaakov was inconsolable, he refused to accept tanchumim, consolation, over the supposed purported death of Yosef. Why? Because Yosef was in fact still alive. And the Gzeira, the Rebbeinu Shalom's initiating that the mess is nishkach min alev, that's only if it's actually mess. And so, he was inconsolable. So if we continue to mourn for Yerushalayim, it's alive, the idea. It's imminent. It's not just something that will happen at some future point. Now. And if I know now that, that means that there's a corner of my heart and my mind availous. Those are the marching orders of the day. But there's some pina, there's some corner which is reserved for recognition, zeicha v'reya, present tense. So perhaps then we could say that kishem shemimayatin, just like in Ov, what kind of miyut? Like the Shari Tzion says, reduction. But there is some hidden simcha. There is some closed simcha. Perhaps we might be madame to Yimon Chagiga asks that there's an indication that there might be, the Rebbeinu Shalom might cry, Kavayochel. Is it possible? There's a Bechi by the Rebbeinu Shalom. So the Gemara differentiates between the external domicile, Kavayochel, or place where the Rebbeinu Shalom Shechina rests, and the internal. Interestingly enough, Rabbeinu Hananel over there reverses the pshat of the other Rishonim. He says that the simcha will be hidden bebote gavoy, internally. Externally, the Rebbeinu Shalom is imo enechi betzora. The Rebbeinu Shalom is with us, not just sympathizes kaviyochel, but empathizes, whatever that means, klapi Hashem. It's the tsar of the Shechina. But there's some place, some hidden spot where it's reserved for simcha. Similarly, Kol Zman the Beis Mikdash is not extant. There's always an Avelis, but it's intensified now in this month. The Flos Miteros Hashem, Naftali Shilaz brings a Zohar. The Zohar says, Es Gid HaNosha, that cosmic wrestling bout between Yaakov and the Malach of Esav, Gematria is Tisha Ov. Es Gid HaNosha, Tisha Ov. Was already anticipating, perhaps that's what the Sforno might be alluding to, the supporters of Torah, but the leadership. And then as we wander through Golus, it only seems that way to us, but the Rebbeinu Shalom is calculating the mileage, and we get the miles. Malbim says, Neidi safata oto simos din osi, din eidecha haloi b'sifosecha, Neidi, you see our wanderings, Ribbon Shalom. Perhaps the quality, the depth of the suffering can make up for a quantity of kilometrage that we can reduce the wanderings yet. And so, similarly, kishem, that when Ov comes in, we focus on the Beis Mikdash, B'matim b'simcha, but B'matim means that there is some intellectual awareness that's reserved, that it's Chevlei Leda, as we heard. It's not an almona that the Baal is not going to return. Chevlei Leda. In the process, agonizing process of remembering, of understanding. Just a few decades ago, there were people here in Eretz Yisrael that were saying, we can abandon saying Kinas. We got back the old city. We have the Kaisel. That's it. How short-sighted, how myopic they were. Of course, Gedolei Torah take a longer view. It's only when you're rooted and anchored in the Mesiras of Deirei Deiros from Sinai till where you are in time, and that acts like a catapult and thrusts your vision forward, and you can anticipate ramifications and extensions of things to come. Nevuah is Nevuah, but Chochmas HaTorah gives Gedolei Torah that koach of perception, of vision. And so, we come to a point, Tisha B'Av begins with the Meraglim bringing a negative report about Eretz Yisrael. And the Rebbeinu Shalom says this day will then be set aside if retribution is necessary. We visited upon this day. As we heard, the Brisker Rav was asked about the making a separate day for the destruction of Magensia, Vermentia, Aspira. He said that it's included in what the Python said, that it, because it's included in Tisha B'Av, that everything extends from that. Perhaps an intensification of that answer was in the fact that it's quoted in the name of the Sma, that those three Kehilas had actually gotten, particularly in Worms, he says it, I believe, that had gotten to the Rhineland after Bayis Rishon. And there's a correspondence between them and those who returned to Eretz Yisrael when they could. And there's a reluctance to leave. They're doing famously, and prosperity, freedom of movement. There's nothing lacking. According to the Sma, the roots of their eventual pain and suffering were in that Shakla Vitalia. If so, it's again, if that is the pshat, then in fact, it's once again rooted in an ambivalent attitude towards Eretz Yisrael. It goes back to the Tisha B'Av of the Meraglim. Am Yisrael, in its relationship to Eretz Yisrael, it's not just another place, it's the place and our place. In the Teichacha, there's a posik, the Ramban says, of quasi-consolation. Vashem moisi ani es ha'otz, v'fnei oyevecha yoshem bo. This land will stay desolate for those who have taken it from you. It won't work for them. You're going to see throughout history a vindication of that nevuah that this land didn't work for anybody else. And in fact, no other nation was able to establish a self-contained political entity, a sovereign state within these boundaries, and make this land work. It was ruled by this empire, that empire, from afar, here, there. It was always a prize, prestige. But it's waiting. The land is waiting for Am Yisrael. Mashma from the Novi, it's mashma from Rishonim, that this land, Eretz HaChaim, there's a b'chinas of Chaim, of Chiyus, in this land. And there's a shidduch between Am Yisrael and Eretz Yisrael that only we can activate this land, and the land won't be activated by anybody else. And so that's a kind of tanchumim as we are chased and pursued through Golus, to know the land is waiting. Do we try and avoid suffering? Of course. Koptrel, with seichel, with criteria. But there's one corner of the heart that we know that in the middle of the Avelus, it's waiting for us to do what we have to do. Then it would come earlier. Be'ito achishana. Gemara Borges relates that they used to break an expensive kli at a simcha to avoid degeneration of the festivities into just a frolicking irresponsibly, recklessly. Gemara continues and says, Rav Nuna Zuta, they asked him, Shalom, Oshia, sing us a song. And he said, Vailon and the Misonon, Vailon and the Misonon, warn to us that we die. put a damper on the festivities. And they said, okay, what do we do? They said, we have mitzvahs. Torah and mitzvahs is Megan. The guy in Yaakov over there says, but what was his point? In fact, he says, it was to a certain extent a continuity of the theme of the earlier discussion in the Gemara. If people didn't die, if human beings weren't mortal, there's no point in putting up a chuppah to have a new couple bring a new dog. Every chuppah is rooted in our very mortality. So he's telling it to us as it is. Singing, you're dancing, it's a chuppah. It's an alarm clock. It's a reminder. It's an azakah. It's a tekiah shofar. Remember, you're mortal. I remember I once shared this thought with Rabbi Kalbach, should be starting gesund, and he said to me, he thinks that's why people cry at chuppahs. That there's this subliminal recognition of our mortality that they're plugging into the insight of Chazal. I'll call upon him, kishem, just like in Ov, we're mamayetin, and we're going with that mahalach. The mamayetin means to reduce, and there is a corner that's reserved for a little island of simcha in the sea of tears, because we know it's korelai moed, we know it's chevlei leida, we know we need it. Similarly, the converse is also true, that we're in the throes of simcha, in the time of great joy. There has to be, as long as the Beis Mikdash is not rebuilt, as long as the Kohanim are not at the Avodah, we always have to have a Zeicha L'Churban. That's the kishem, perhaps. And that can only be walking that peculiar tightrope, straddling that paradox. Surely the emphasis now is on Avelus, and the emphasis in order will be on Simcha, but there has to be that pinah of the other in each. Straddling that tightrope is the challenge. What the Chazon Ish used to say, that a Jew has to live with stiras, has to live with contradictions. His raya was that the Eicha that we read today, for Yirmiyahu Novi to have been eligible to write that with Ruach HaKodesh, he had to be besimcha. It's a prerequisite for Nevuah, for Ruach HaKodesh. The Novi has to be besimcha. That means he had to be besimcha when he wrote Eicha. How could he be besimcha? Because he understood the Chevlei Leida. He understood. He knew. He's living through the devastation. It's not just projecting what is ultimately going to be. And that's why 100 years ago, World War I, most historians make the case that World War II was an exact extension, direct of World War I because the problems hadn't been settled. They were just glossed over. That means that the Shoah has its roots in Tisha B'Av. All the devastation, the kihillos, and the norms of Jewish life of World War I, and yet it was compounded beyond belief later in World War II, but all rooted in Tisha B'Av. Es Gidanosha Tisha Ov by Rishon, by Sheni, Girush Sfard, again and again in history. World War I and its extension, World War II. But there's a pinah. The Abarbanel says that if Ferdinand and Isabel would have known the chizuk, the encouragement that they're giving to the Yodei Dova, would have been worth it for them to rescind the decree. What's that chizuk? Because it's Tisha B'Av. We know it's not accidental. You see the hashgacha, and if you see the hashgacha, the Rebbeinu Shalom is still the master caretaker tending to us. The master shepherd that still has his eyes on his flock. And there are those in our time who have very vocally, vociferously critiqued Am Yisrael's walking to the slaughter like sheep. Firstly, it's a total disregard of how inconceivable it was what they were experiencing. That a civilized nation should go so barbaric and insane, an entire nation, and the world should tolerate it. I'm not talking about those that even joined forces with them, but the civilized world should allow it. Inconceivable. So it was so beyond comprehension, it was beyond the ken of those people, and there's a total disregard, very cynical, cavalier, lack of appreciation when they talk about it with the 2020 hindsight. But let's go a step further. Over the years, tshuvas have been found. They were written by Paiskim. Not long ago, I think they uncovered tshuvas in Hungary. They were written by Paiskim, from people, Gedalim, who answered questions from the rank and file. Rav Oshri, in his tshuvas Memamakim, talks about a Jew that asks the following shaila. We didn't put on tefillin this morning. Right? Shachas, that's the psak. We delay putting on tefillin till mincha. But this Jew is asking, we're being taken out for slave labor, and we're not going to make it back till after Shkia, and there was one pair of tefillin that they had smuggled in to the slave labor camp, and they passed it around. Should I consciously take the initiative to break the minig and put on tefillin in the morning? Or is the pshat, that's the minig, so I don't break the minig, even though tefillin is a daraisa, and then I'm an onus, then if they bring me back after Shkia. Rav Oshri Paskin put on tefillin. I ask you, where is there another nation in the world? Where is there a people that discipline, that clarity, in the midst of hell, functioning as if it was heaven, with the objective criteria of the Rebbeinu Shlomo's plan for the world. And so he could paskin, put on tefillin, don't forfeit the doraisa. And the Abarbanel could paskin that it's Tisha B'Av, but we're going out with tupim and chaylas. Why? Because we are empowered, enfranchised with the Torah Shebal Peh. Who's going to paskin? Only those who are immersed and saturated in the Mesiras and all the nuances and ideals of the Pritei Protim of Torah and Halacha. We've said it in the past. There's a democracy of opportunity in Torah. Anybody can become a Godel. He's Meisa Nefesh sufficiently. He can maximize and outstrip his given keiches. It's happened, we know it. But there's an aristocracy of opinion, a democracy of opportunity, but an aristocracy of opinion. The criteria, yeah, do away with kinnis, not do away with kinnis. Nonsense. You're not eligible for a vote, for a voice in that debate. It's not a popularity contest. It's rooted in criteria, objective criteria of mastering all of the data of Torah and absorbing it to the level that there's that siyata d'shmaya that assists from above to make the right decisions in the right place and the right time. I don't think anybody disagrees that coming back to Eretz Yisrael in our time is clearly an act of providence. The arena of debate has been that what we call the Torah community has steadfastly held that we don't have the mandate, the samchut in our time to alter, tamper with any of the tefillas. We are not equipped to quantify it. This feeling, this experience, whether it's tefillah or whatnot. Something is afoot, but reserve judgment. Something is happening. If 30 years ago somebody would have said that the representative government of the collective body of the people in Israel are talking about giving back part of Yerushalayim, impossible. That's what we're up to. Are they right? They're wrong? I don't know. But I know that they didn't know and they don't know. That I do know. And I know that our only option is to go with Gedolei Torah, who because of that catapult of the past are projected more into the future. The decisions are invested with another level of insight. Their tears are koptreon. Right now, the emphasis, Chazal say, the Bruya said, Yitamu chatoyim, the sin should be evaporated, not the sinners. Our mission statement is mustering the maximum amount of excellence, devotion, our learning, our davening, inclusively. Rabbi Simcha points out in the parsha of Tshuva, one pasuk says, Vashebosa Elovavecha, and only the next pasuk says, V'shafta ad Hashem Elokecha. He said there'll be, we'll witness in the last chapter of Jewish history unfolding in the Messianic era, Jews who have abandoned all connection to their Jewishness. Ostensively. They're not Shomei Mitzvahs, Nebuch Lo Aleinu. What's the residue? What's the last bit? What they call the Pintel Yid, that little spark point. They will feel a certain residual kinship to other Jews that they don't feel that with a non-Jew. They dress like the guy, they talk like the guy, they listen to their music, dance to their songs. Why should they feel more comfortable with Jews? And obviously he's talking at a time where there isn't overt anti-Semitism, because then they have no choice. He says, and Jews will begin to, those Jews, a significant number, Nebuch, there are those who don't even have that, but a significant number will be living through this dichotomy, this strange ambiguity. I'm accepted, I live like the guy. Why do I feel this connection to Jews and Jewishness and to that little country in the Middle East? And they'll begin to investigate it. And the only explanation after a process of elimination, multiple choice, they'll come to the conclusion that the only way to explain it is we stood at Sinai together. So first it'll be Vashivos Elovecha, they'll come back to that which they feel in their hearts. That's their relationship to other Jews. And that in turn will lead them to v'shavta ad Hashem Elokecha. Read in today's parsha, Klal Yisrael comes down to Yisrael, Yisrael Libonim, Shantem, the whole sequence. They go out into Golus. For no apparent reason, all of a sudden the pasuk says, "Ubikashtem meshom es Hashem Elokecha b'chol levavecha u'motzosa." What happened? There's no description of anything, any turning point here. So number one, the Mefoshim already take note. I think it's the Nesivus that says, Bikashtam Loshen Rabim, Motzosa, Loshen Yochid. Many are going to search, only Yechidim will find. There are others that say, Bikashtam, people come from a lot of different starting points. What moves them to begin to search. But when they find the truth of Motzosa, then they're one. It's one nation. Panovich Rav once asked, the Medrash says that there are 10 major famines that the Rebbeinu Shem sent to the world. First one is listed, B'zeis HaPecha Teicha Lechem, then by Avram, by Yitzchak, again, Rus, famines in history. One of those famines is Vishlachti Rov Leila Lechem, Tzomei Leila Mayim, not for bread, not for water, but to hear the Dvar Hashem. One of Rav asked, how does that fit with the others? That's a positive thing, that people are thirsting and hungering for Ruchnius. Even though the next pasuk says, "Vayeshotu ba'oretz v'lo yimtzu," they'll drift in the land and they won't find. So the Panovich Rav, anybody who's ever exposed lo aleinu to a famine, sees people rummaging through the trash and picking up rinds and peels and chewing on it as if it gives nourishment. That's a klola. Similarly, in the Messianic era, people are going to be thirsty for Ruchnius, and they're going to pick up the klipas, the rinds and the peels, and chew on it as if it's giving spiritual nourishment. That's a curse. Okay. The pshat of the Panovich Rav rings true. But we have to ask, how come over there it says, "V'yeshaytu ba'oretz v'lo yimtzu"? They're going to drift in the land they won't find. And over here in the pasuk we read this morning, it says, "Ubikashta mishom es Hashem Elokecha u'motzosa ki sivshena b'chol levavecha." But the tshuva is in the pasuk. You don't have to go very far. There's a t'nai. Ki sidre sheno bechol levavecha. You go with your entire heart. It's not a hobby. It's not an adjunct to your existence. It's not a supplement. It's your life. This is what you're here for. That's a t'nai. Then umotzosa. How did you get there? Process of elimination? The pasuk of V'yeshotu ba'oretz Rashi says by the mon, pasuk says V'yeshotu, they just had to drift out. Same lotion. Rashi says b'li omel, without any effort. If you're spiritual window shopping, it doesn't work. You're not going to find truth. You're not ready to buy. And that's a phenomenon that surely seems to be very prevalent in our generation. Spiritual window shopping. Ready to buy means you're ready to pay the price. Fine, you can negotiate, do it in payments, but you have to pay the price. It occurred to me that pasuk we read, Misham, Gematria Misham is Mitzrayim. What happened? Where did the switch take place here? We do have a peculiar minig that whatever night the Seder is fixed, that'll be the night of Tisha B'Av. The Medrash read the Posik today, the Medrash Darshans on the Posik is Biyani B'Marorim, that what you eat ala Seva is connected to the Morah. There's some correlation between Pesach and Tisha B'Av. In the past, we've tried to think of it in this manner. The dominant number, the Seder is 4. 4 cups of gula, 4 lashanis of gula, 4 cups of wine, 4 bonim, 4. 4 is the imois. The matriarchs were 4. The patriarchs were 3. Shlomo Melech says, Shma b'ni, Musa avicha, listen to the Musa of your father, al titosh, don't abandon the Torah of your mother. The Musa of your father, it's as if you have to do a kumva, say you have to do an action. Shema, you have to listen. It's outside of you, you have to allow it entry. You have to focus. Teres imecha, if you don't do a pula, if you don't do an act to extricate it, it's there. Al titosh, don't abandon it. It's there. Why? Your mother was a Jewess, you're a Jew. Did you earn it? Did you ask for it? No. It's a fact. That's Isarusa de Leila. The Rebbeinu Shalom awarded that to you for some reason. Do you have to retroactively re-earn it? Of course, otherwise it's Namadik Isufa. It's bread of shame. But the state of affairs in Mitzrayim was there was just minimal Jewish consciousness. Jewish identity. They didn't change their clothes, their language, their names. They respected family purity. But they were Oivdei Avodah Zorah. But that Jewish identity was enough to hold them till the next stage. That they should be eligible for the Yisarusa de Leila, for the Rebbeinu Shalom to reach to them. Perhaps the connection to Tisha B'Av is you're offered investments in 2 companies. One company thrives during the bull markets, during the prosperous years, but has no strategy on how to deal with the recessions and the depressions. Another company maybe seems to thrive a bit less, but they have a strategy how to deal with recessions and depressions. Most sober investors will go for the second company. We're being taught Pesach is a festive night. What's like they say, the Yiddish, wie fährt da rein a Yoven and Sukkah? What's a Greek doing in the Sukkah? What are you bringing in Tisha B'Av to the Seder? No. That's our game plan. You're being told now we have a plan that there are going to be recessions and depressions. They're going to be the Tisha B'Avs of Jewish history. But we have a plan. We have a halacha. We have Gedolei Torah. Even when we're out of Eretz Yisrael, we have Botei Din, we have Talmidei Chachamim. We have a game plan. And that's why the tears are mitigated by a certain bittersweet tang that there is reserved a certain level of simcha. Moed. So, what remains is to do a lot of personal soul searching, self-inventory, and how we can build ourselves in the vernacular of today, grow ourselves. It's going to happen in the Beis Medrash. And Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld read the Haftarah this past week, Tzion b'mishpat tipode v'shoveho b'tzedakah. He saw something that not many people see in those words. Pre-computer, pre-calculator. And he looked at the pasuk and he said, Tzion b'mishpat tipode. That's Talmud Yerushalmi in Gematria. V'shoveho b'tzedakah. That's Talmud Babli in Gematria. Remember once discussing this with Yedid, Feivel Kohn, the Mechaber Badi HaShulchan, and Feivel said to me, Medrash says when the Rebbeinu Shalom was Beira the Odom, his Moach was from Eretz Yisrael, and his Leiv was from Bovel v'Shar HaRotzos. And that's why in Babli, continuing with Rabbi Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld's word, and Yerushalmi, two different styles. Yerushalmi presents halachas. Doesn't engage us in the Shakla V'Tarya, b'machashakim Hoshivani. The Rebbe of Klal Yisrael in Golus has become, Talmud Babli. We have to go through the process. We have to learn it and become part of it from within and reconstruct it from within. That's the immersion in the Yama Talmud that we need in order to come up Toho. And that's why, said Reb Feivel, in Yerushalmi, when somebody holds somebody's position, it says Adaite, according to his mind, his thoughts. In the Babli, it says Alibe. Bovel is Leiv v'Shar HaRotzos. Shakla V'Tarya involves you. It's mind and heart merging together. Chazal do say, could be there's a certain, there surely is another level of challenge in attaining to that clarity, but that's the route that we have to go. So, we're mispalel, davening, saying extra tilim for every Jew who was exposed today to Sani Yisrael, Lo Aleinu. It should be a day as we approach even till the end of Tisha B'Av, that the reevaluations, the self-inventory, communal inventory should be such that Miyitain Roshi Mayim, the Koptraum, should understand what's at stake. What are the stakes here? And that we are equipped with the tools to make it happen faster, to impact more Jews. No shortcuts, no abbreviated condensations, but yes, immersing in the ASIC of Torah brings the Harevno, the sweetness, the joy. That's what we don't learn today. What an extraordinary demonstration. The not learning is the loudest statement, is that what it's all about is get to the point where the thirst and the hunger for learning is because it's delicious. That's why you're not learning today. And once we have that, it's a communicable disease. It's contagious. Anybody that comes within our Dalit Amas is very, very likely to be nidbak, to be hit and afflicted with that germ as well. May we be zeicha that for Shalom in Eretz Yisrael, may we be zeicha that Achenu Beis Yisrael will join us in whichever Beis Medrash they choose, according to the minig of their fathers and grandfathers, and that we should see B'mheira v'yameinu b'yasa goyim b'mheira.